Aloha. I hope everyone is doing well. I'd invite my fellow panelists to feel free to come on screen and join us today. Thank you so much for all of you that are in attendance. I hope you can hear me okay. I live in a very lively neighborhood, so apologies in advance for any noise in the background of children playing. But it's so nice to be in community with all of you here today. It has been a whirlwind of a time at the American Civil Liberties Union of Hawaii. And, before I share my opening remarks, I wanted to invite our esteemed and beloved board director, Kavika Riley, to share with us some of his wisdom in this moment.
Mahalo Sama. Aloha mai kako. Hi, everybody. I hope you can hear me well. My neighborhood's a little quieter at the moment, but you never know. Joining you from Kaimuki this evening. And thank you for the opportunity just to share a welcome and some reflection. First, I wanted to thank the folks that are making this workshop possible. So mahalo nui to the Hawaii Coalition for Immigrant Rights, the Legal Clinic, Roots Reborn, and of course, Salma and your amazing team at the American Civil Liberties Union of Hawaii. All of you trainers who are making this possible, as well as the many limahana, the working hands who are not here on the screen, right, but who partnered with all of you that are offering this training so that folks could attend. So mahalo for making this possible. I also want to acknowledge all of you in attendance who give meaning to that work that these trainers and their colleagues put into this Know Your Rights session. I want to say that not only, for the meaning that you give to this important work, but because you chose to do this with your time this evening. So many of you, of course, came from work today. Maybe some of you are physically still there right now as you're joining us remotely. Perhaps you came from school. Perhaps you came from caring for loved ones, compensated or uncompensated. Either way, I'm sure that your day was a day of labor. And you could have done a variety of things with your evening. You chose to invest your time this evening in your knowledge. You chose to invest in being makoko, in being prepared. And I am grateful for that because I'm grateful that I get to live in a community with folks like yourselves, where even though I don't see your faces, participating in this training and knowing the numbers behind it helps me know that I get to live with and by and among people like yourselves who are coming from a place of care for their families, care for their neighbors, care for people that maybe they don't even know. But from that place of care, you choose to know your rights and understand the rights of others. So thank you so much for that. Preparation, knowledge, these are things that are important in many cultures. And certainly that is true from my understanding and my perspective with respect to ancestral wisdom among the native Hawaiian kupuna, who stewarded this land for so long and who passed much of this knowledge to the present generations. I think of a variety of olelo no eau, of wise sayings or proverbs that were transmitted down the generations that speak to the importance of preparation. Just to share one perhaps that comes to mind, you may have heard the olelo no eau, a ohe ulu e loa'a, I ka po kole o ka lo. This literally translates to no breadfruit can be reached when the picking stick is too short. The meaning, the deeper meaning behind that olelo no eau is often said to be there is no success without preparation. And you can picture yourself there, right? Think of the visual behind that saying. You're standing at the base of this grand ulu tree, and you've traveled far from wherever you started. When Kupuna started to share that saying, I don't think we had cars. I don't think we had any of the e-vehicles that I see zooming around in the neighborhood. you walked there and you came and you stood at the base of that tree, and your ability to pick from those breadfruit was limited by your preparation. How long was your picking stick? Relatedly, just one other olalono eo to share along the same theme. Ike ike ao nui, me ke ao iki. To know the small currents and the little currents. This describes somebody who is well versed, but it also speaks to the importance, the calling to know the forces around you and to know and respond when those big tides have changed. So, regardless of the metaphor that we pick from, this is probably a time when our picking sticks need to be longer, when our awareness of those tides around that need to be greater. We need to be ready because knowledge and action together is necessary in order for us to protect those we love, to protect our neighbors, and to protect the values that make community important and real. So mahalo again to the trainers and organizations for making this possible. Mahalo to all of you in attendance. And thank you for the work that all of you do and for the benefit that I and my family get to have to live among you here in Hawaii. Mahalo.
Thank you so much, Kavika, for sharing that beautiful wisdom with us. And I know all of us here feel lucky and blessed to be able to live on these beautiful sacred lands of Hawaii. And so thank you for those beautiful comments, and to our Kanaka Maoli and the indigenous descendants of the land. And we are so happy, many of us coming from immigrant communities ourselves, to be able to live here. And we know that that is a privilege. So thank you. And in this time, more than ever before, I feel like our communities are truly illuminated by the presence of immigrants, folks from different cultures and regions of the world who have often fled their homelands to escape persecution. And these same vulnerable parties, many of whom left for a number of different reasons, everyone's story is unique and profound. But these same vulnerable peoples that are now living here are vulnerable to being re traumatized, particularly with what is happening at the federal level. We are witnessing a peculiar moment of history, and there are an abundance of feelings that are circulating. And the American Civil Liberties Union of Hawaii is here to help calm the anxiety by spreading public education. That is the best thing that we can do for our energies, for our souls, for the resistance of oppression, is to ensure that our energies are properly aligned. There is endless work to be done. And I want to, in advance, if you are reaching out to the ACLU of Hawaii right now for some kind of help on a myriad of different issues, apologies if we have not yet gotten back to you. We will. I know there's so much happening and we are trying, but we knew, as best as we can, we are trying to respond to the call of what the community needs. And this is what has been the first thing on our agenda with the coming of this new administration since the first day of the inauguration, is that our new federally elected president has an agenda for mass deportation, and we are motivated to push back against that agenda. And so, we are here hoping that this Know Your Rights workshop tonight will be a tool of empowerment for you, because it is not enough for you just to know your rights. You must use your rights. You must exercise your rights. And we hope that after today's presentation, with the practical information that we plan to provide you with, that you will exercise those rights, and that you will not take your freedoms for granted, and that you will not let your freedoms be usurped from you. We need collective action to push against the powers that pervade us. And these are not just government political powers, these are social economic powers and forces that try to tear apart our communities, greed, capitalist structures. And it really takes education Knowledge is power. That is all we need to really support one another and empower one another. And when you use your rights, not just to help yourself, uh, you're also using your rights to push up against an entire system. So know that you using your rights is not just helping yourself, but it's helping other people as well. And I just want to echo what Kavika was saying, and I want to thank all of you for being here tonight. All 133 participants that we have signed on right now, and I know more will be joining. Nearly 200 people have registered to get this critical knowledge and this information, which is being recorded and which we will circulate soon. So, without further ado, I just wanted to say thank you once more. And I wanted to open up with our first panelist of the evening, who is our newly joined senior staff attorney at the ACLU of Hawaii. We are so lucky to have you on board with us, Emily. The precision and the composure you bring to the office has been beautiful to witness. So thank you for being here. And I want to just share with the audience a little bit about who you are. So Emily Hills is a senior staff attorney with the ACLU of Hawaii, and she works to defend civil rights and civil liberties through litigation and community advocacy. Among the issues she focuses on are LGBTQ plus rights, gender equity, reproductive freedom, prisoners' rights, the decriminalization of poverty, police misconduct, bail reform, mass incarceration, the freedom of expression. And tonight she will be talking to you a little bit about your constitutional protections as immigrants or folks from immigrant families or who are directly impacted by some of these laws. And so, without further ado, Emily, I'll let you just get right into some of the constitutional overlays with immigrant rights.
Thank you so much, Selma. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Okay, can everybody see that? Okay. So welcome to Interacting with ICE Agents, Know Your Rights. I have to start with a disclaimer because I am a lawyer. This presentation is for information purposes. It's not legal advice per se. You should always be consulting with a lawyer if you do get arrested, if you end up in removal proceedings, right? This is not substitute for consulting with a lawyer. And then I also have to add the caveat that in the current climate that we're in with this current administration, policies and practices are changing very, very quickly, like almost every day. So I'm going to do my best to give you guys an overlay. These constitutional rights at issue really won't be changing, but some of the other advice given later in the presentation might end up being slightly different depending on how different policies end up getting enforced. So to start out, I've already said ICE on the title slide. I just wanted to lay out some definitions that I'm going to be using and that I think my other panelists will be using as well. So ICE refers to the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement. They're basically immigration police. They operate inside the United States. CBP refers to Customs and Border Patrol. They are also immigration police. They tend to operate at the borders and near border areas. And then DHS gets referred to as well, and they are the Department of Homeland Security. So they are kind of the parent agency that immigration enforcement lies under. So I think those are the main ones. These are all federal agencies. This is all really federal law that we're talking about today. So today I'm going to give this broad overview about constitutional rights and what to do if immigration agents come to your home. Then I'm going to turn it over to Narabelle at the legal clinic. She's going to be talking about what happens if ICE stops you on the street, if they come to your workplace, or if you end up in removal proceedings and get arrested. Then Narabelle is going to hand it off to Aparna from Roots Reborn, who is going to talk about if ICE comes to sensitive places, places of worship, hospitals, schools. And then Liza is going to close it out by talking about policy protections and things that we can do on, I think, a larger systemic level. And we'll finish up with Q&A. Please do feel free to post Q&A in the chats as well. I think we're going to do our best to answer most of those at the end of the presentation. Okay, so immigrants have rights, despite what people might be hearing in the media or from other people. The Constitution of the United States applies to everybody located in the United States, whether they are citizens or non-citizens. It is really important, these rights that I'm going to be talking about, they apply inside the US. So they might not apply to people who are, say, applying to come to the United States and are not located here already. They do apply regardless of immigration status. So documented, undocumented, whether they're on temporary visas or permanent visas, it's everybody located inside the US. And then I do have this caveat. Narabelle's going to be talking about this later. Some of these rights might look slightly different for people who are in removal proceedings because sometimes removal proceedings come with extra rules, but the basic rights are the same. So first, we all have the right to be silent. This comes from the Fifth Amendment of the US Constitution. There is also a corollary in the Hawaii Constitution. And it means that you don't have to answer questions. This includes your name or place of birth, your immigration status, with the caveat that you would need to disclose if you're at the border trying to enter. Lawful permanent residents have to disclose, but generally, if someone asks you your immigration status, you don't have to tell them. And criminal history. If someone knows your immigration status and is asking about offenses that might make you deportable, you don't have to answer those questions. It doesn't give anybody the right to lie or provide false documents. There can actually be like criminal penalties. So I wanted to make sure I highlighted that. And there is this narrow exception for stops by police during traffic stops where people do have to provide their name and address. And I didn't want to mislead anybody by not including that. But generally speaking, if you run into immigration agents and they're asking you your name, your place of birth, your immigration status, if you're deportable, you don't have to talk to them. We all have the right to be free from unreasonable searches. This comes from the Fourth Amendment of the US Constitution and Hawaii corollaries. And this means that nobody, police officers, ICE agents, nobody can enter your home without a warrant or consent. They can't search your car or your belongings without a warrant or your consent. They can't search your person, meaning pockets or even like bags that you might be carrying on you, without a warrant, consent, or if you get arrested. And you don't have to consent to a search. I added these little asterisks. There are some exceptions for emergencies or if there's concern that someone might be carrying a weapon or something like that. So no, I mean, this is a very broad area of the law. I'm simplifying, but generally speaking, if somebody wants to search a place or inside a container, they need a warrant or they need your consent. Okay, we also have the right to be free from unreasonable seizures. Fourth Amendment to the US Constitution and Hawaii corollaries. And a seizure in this context, it means a stop where police officers are talking to you and you're not, or talking to you and you don't feel like you can really leave. It also includes a formal arrest where somebody might be taken to, say, a detention facility or even a police station. So it's really important to know arrest or detention in particular that requires, we call it probable cause. I included this term because people hear that on TV. It's probable cause. It really means in this context, a reason to believe that someone is violating immigration law. But if someone is being stopped on the street or if they're interacting with immigration enforcement kind of in a public context, there might not be probable cause for detention. And so that's why it's really important, those other rights about searches, about being silent, because immigration agents might try to get probable cause by asking questions or getting consent to searches. So it's really important to keep in mind you can't be arrested unless they have a reason to believe you're violating immigration law. Don't give them the information that would give them that reason. Let's say somebody does get arrested, does end up in removal proceedings. Everybody has a right to due process. This comes from the Fifth Amendment to the US Constitution and Hawaii corollaries, although in the federal context, we're talking about the federal Constitution. And due process, what that really means is fair proceeding. It means that the way the immigration proceeding is run has to be fair. That means there is usually a right to a hearing before deportation. I have this little asterisk here because there is a recent expedited removal order. That expedited removal that could let someone be deported without a hearing. That's why we would recommend carrying proof of residency for over 2 years, whether that's, I think Aparna is going to be talking a little bit more about what kind of documents, but I just flagged that you have a right to a hearing. Generally, there might be some exceptions. People in immigration proceedings also have a right to a lawyer. Unfortunately, and I don't feel like this is right, but unfortunately, it's not a court-appointed lawyer, but it does mean that you have a right to ask for, say, another court date in order to be able to get a lawyer. And then everybody has the right to call witnesses or present evidence. And that's another reason why you should talk to a lawyer about these cases if you do end up in a removal hearing, because you want to make sure that you're presenting as much evidence as you can. We also all have the right to freedom of speech and free association. This comes from the First Amendment of the US Constitution. It means that you have the right to protest and criticize the government or other organizations or other countries. It also means you have the right to join groups that protest and criticize the government or others, and that you can't be retaliated against for exercising First Amendment rights. Caveat that this doesn't mean helping people violate the law, like that helping is prohibited, but just supportive speech is not prohibited, and you can't be retaliated against for that. I know that there have been recent concerns. ACLU of Hawaii is very concerned about executive orders that threaten to revoke visas for people based on ideology or based on support. Please reach out and contact the ACLU of Hawaii if you're concerned about that, because it's something that we're working on, right? I think there's serious concern that this would be retaliating for First Amendment rights. So those are kind of the broad overview of rights that apply in this context. I want to now focus in, what do you do if ICE agents knock on your door, come to your home? First thing to know is they might say that they're police. They are not really police, but they are law enforcement. They may or may not be wearing uniforms. Normally, police officers, like state law enforcement officers who come to your home, they will be wearing state police uniforms. If someone is saying that they're police, they're knocking on your door, and they're not wearing a uniform, they might be ICE. They might also have a badge or a vest that says Immigration and Customs Enforcement. And before you open the door, make sure you can ask. You are allowed to ask what agency they're coming from. You are allowed to ask to see their identification, to get their badge number, and to get that information so that you know who you're interacting with at your home. They might ask you questions. That could be even before you get to your door. They could be shouting through the door what your name is, or if someone else they're looking for is present in the home. You don't have to answer any questions because you have the right to remain silent. Our advice is not to open the door. If immigration enforcement comes to your door, don't open it. Without your consent, ICE cannot enter your home unless they have a warrant signed by a judge. So you want to make sure you're keeping doors shut and latched. I know it's really common here. I do this myself, that I kind of don't close the main front door. I just have a screen door to let the air flow. Keep that screen door latched. Make sure that there's like a little lock on it if you can. Teach your children not to open the door for anyone that they don't know. Because really, once a door is open, once it's cracked open, they can enter, even if it means pushing you out of the way. Once that door gets open, it can be interpreted as consent for them to come into your home, and that's what you want to prevent. You can ask if they have a warrant signed by a judge, right? That's the other exception. If you're not consenting, they would be allowed in if they have a warrant signed by a judge. They rarely have a warrant to enter somebody's home that's actually signed by a judge. They might try to intimidate you into opening your door and consenting because they don't have a warrant. So that's something to keep in mind as you're talking with them. If they say that they have a warrant, ask to see it. Don't open the door. Still don't open the door. You can have them slip the document under the door, or they could hold it up, whether it's you can see through like the little hole in the door. You want to look really carefully at this document because you want to make sure that it actually is a warrant that was signed by a judge. So is it a judicial warrant? A judicial warrant is issued by a court, signed by a judge, which is different. It's not an immigration judge. This is a judge that's appointed under the federal constitution. It will say the address of the location to be searched, or it will state the name of the person that they're looking for. And it should list a time frame for when, we call this a time frame for execution of the warrant, but it will say when the warrant is valid. An immigration warrant isn't going to have all of that information. First off, it's going to be issued by DHS, Department of Homeland Security. You can usually look for on the header, it'll say DHS. It might even give a DHS form number. It's going to be signed by an immigration officer. Sometimes they'll be signed by an immigration judge. An immigration judge is not the same thing as an Article 3 judge that signs a judicial warrant. It might even state on there that the authority to issue this immigration warrant comes from immigration law. It's not going to say that it's coming from the court. And so this kind of just shows you the big differences between a judicial warrant and an immigration warrant. So you want to make sure if they have a judicial warrant, they are legally allowed into the home. But you'd want to say, is this actually the address? Is the address that's listed on this warrant? Is the date that it can be executed on, is that still current, or is this way expired? Is it actually signed by a judge? I will say not all the judges use actual signatures. Sometimes they will use like a stamp, but it would be a stamp from a judge. It would say who the judge is. It would say what their title is, whether it's U.S. District Court Judge, U.S. Magistrate Judge, like on this one. There will probably be like a case number. Here, that case number is like stamped underneath search and seizure warrant. But this looks like a court document, and it says right at the top, U.S. District Court. Right? The immigration warrant is a little bit different. I would like to say it doesn't look that official, but it says, signature of immigration officer. It's issued by the Department of Homeland Security. All of this kind of tells you this is an immigration warrant. It's not a judicial warrant. And then my last kind of piece of advice is that if they come to your home, document the interaction however you can. Take a photo of any document that they show you, because it's unlikely they'll let you keep it. But you definitely want to have proof of whatever it was that they gave you. If you can, ask a friend or family member to it's important that they openly record the interaction, but they are allowed to openly record. Clearly, if they come into your home and you've already said, no, you don't want them in your home and they don't have a warrant, you need to clearly say that you don't consent, but otherwise, please remain calm. Don't resist, don't shout, keep yourself and your family safe. You don't want to escalate that situation. And then after ICE agents leave, take photos of any damage. If you've gotten arrested, make sure that your friends and family who are there would know to take photos of any damage, and have them, and you can write down exactly what happened right away so that your memory remains clear, because all of that information might be able to be used in an immigration proceeding down the road. So those are my tips on constitutional rights and what to do if immigration comes to your home. Now I'm going to turn it over. Salma, are you doing transitions for us, or I can turn it over to Maribel at the legal clinic?
Yeah, let me give her a quick introduction. Thank you so much, Emily, for that overview and the slides and showing us the difference between the warrants so we could properly identify them or see them with our eyes. And that was super helpful. Thank you so much for getting those documents and placing them side by side. Appreciate your time. And Narabel, thank you so much for being here. Narabel is a senior staff attorney with the Legal Clinic, licensed in Puerto Rico and practicing law since 2002. Her practice area is focused on labor and employment law for almost 13 years, and she relocated to Hawaii in 2015. And she has been practicing immigration law since 2019. Mainly focused on removal defense. So Narabel, thank you so much. Tonight she'll be covering what happens if you get arrested, if you get stopped on the street or at work, how your rights look during different removal proceedings. So thank you, Narabel. I'll turn it over to you.
Aloha, everyone. Thank you so much. It's an honor being here with this group and all the participants. And I'm going to share my screen immediately because we have a lot to cover and we really want to be able to cover everything. So now everybody should be able to see my screen. And I'm going to start with just a little background of what the Legal Clinic is. Legal Clinic started as TLC, Tender Loving Care. Then they came up with the Legal Clinic. And the mission of the Legal Clinic is to ensure justice for low-income immigrants and migrants in Hawaii through high-quality immigration legal services. We are not private practice, so we have the luxury of really spending time and providing legal services from the standpoint of the trauma-informed. Also, our mission is to educate, and this is exactly what we're trying to do today. And also, we do advocacy. So those are the three pillars of the legal clinic, and we operate as a law firm, so we provide immigration legal services. So let us dive in immediately. And Emily did a great job explaining all the constitutional rights, and because that will definitely set the foundation for the different instances where the different authorities can come in contact with you. And right now, we're going to be talking about what should I do if police or ICE stop my car. And I need to say that, again, there is interaction with criminal law. However, we are focusing today in immigration, okay? So please don't take necessarily this advice and try to apply it if you're not an immigrant, or if you're not a migrant and you get stopped. That's a different set of laws. However, there is an overlap, so I'm gonna try to start. So again, the way I learn, it's by comparisons and by kind of association. So let's start with the authority. So police will have, like Emily said, they need reasonable suspicion and or probable causes to stop you, okay? So this means that they must have observed a specific violation or suspected criminal activity. Then they can search your car, like she said, if you give them consent. Of course, everything can be done if you give consent. And so that means that if you gave consent, you must have said something which you should not. Okay, we cannot emphasize enough. Quiet. If there is probable cause and suspects criminal evidence present, they can also search your car, or if there is a warrant. Now let's compare with immigration. So as a general rule, immigration authority will not have authority to stop you. However, if there is reasonable suspicion, and this is usually seen at the border or near the border, they can stop your car, okay? It can also be in different scenarios. However, like Emily said, I'm gonna go to the extreme. I'm gonna say it's almost impossible for somebody to intervene with your car. And don't take my word, just let's go to the factors. So reasonable suspicion for immigration is gonna be based upon the characteristics of the area in which they encounter a vehicle. That's why it is more likely to happen at the border and not here in Hawaii that we are like so far. The vehicle's proximity to the border, there it is. Patterns of traffic in the particular road, and information about previous illegal border crossing in the area. Whether a certain kind of car is frequently used to transport contraband or concealed aliens. A heavily loaded car or an unusual number of passengers. So I think that we can definitely conclude that it's going to be very difficult for immigration to have reasonable suspicion and stop you. Like Emily and Salma have been mentioning, we're trying here to give you practical tips. I can recite the law. I cannot. My memory is not that good. But the law, it's not what you need when you're out there and you're scared and if I'm driving and a police car comes, I get anxious. So, and that's the same feeling, So the practical tip here is that what's usually going to happen is that ICE will go in conjunction with police. So that's why you need to really be able to identify who's who, okay? Oh, sorry about it. So you really need to be able to identify who's who. We have all seen police officers, and we know that they're in uniforms, they will have badges, and they will have, like, you know, the insignia. In contrast, ICE officers will be using plain clothing. They're not going to be using uniforms. If anything, they will wear a vest. And now that, you know, we've been flooded with images, they will wear a vest indicating on the back, police ICE or ICE police or CBP, okay? So if you see that, they have no authority. Let's keep on going. So what to do? What to do? So just like in any car stop, if police stops you, you need to stop the car in a safe place as quickly as possible. Turn off the car, turn on the emergency lights. I drafted here, open the window, but it's better if you just crack the window. And it is a practical thing because nobody can, you know, get their hands in, or so you crack the window and place your hands on the wheel. In Hawaii, Hawaii is a state that you need to provide, upon request, show the police the driver's license, the registration, and proof of insurance. They will request you that, and you need to provide it. But from those documents, the officer is not going to be able to tell if you're an immigrant or migrant. It's a regular state ID and license, registration. It doesn't have any information about the country of origin. Then it's important for you to know that both the drivers and passengers have the right to remain silent, okay? Don't resist the arrest. Don't speed up. Don't run. That's another golden rule. You will never, ever, ever run, okay? Here, we have a light bulb here. It says, show the red card. So I'm just gonna pause real quick and tell you about the red card. Red card, it's called a red card because usually it's printed in red. And it has the 4 general rights that Emily just explained. The right to remain silent, the right to have, not to provide documents, and to be assisted by an attorney. So you don't have to say anything. You don't have to say anything. You just give the card. And the reason that again, practical tips, the reason that I am saying that you should remain silent, it's not only because that's the right. It's also because, just like me, because I am from Puerto Rico, so my native is Spanish, and I have a strong accent. So if we have accent, it's better for us to remain silent and just don't give any, don't engage, okay? So if you show the red card, then they already know. Same if you're in your home and you see that this thing is, you know, going on, you just slip the red card under the door, okay? Okay, let's go there. So another scenario where you can come in contact with let me go back real quick. I want to talk real quick about DUIs. And I am pretty sure that you guys have been reading on the news and listening on the news that there have been, like, you know, some kind of interesting interactions and stops or even arrests for DUIs. And it's been on the news. This is not me. It's been on the news that some people have been stopped because what? Because, you know, reasonable suspicion. So it is because of what? Can they smell at a distance? No, it is based upon behavior. So people with Parkinson may look like they're drunk. People with other conditions People with high blood sugar or low blood sugar may look like they're drunk. And they've been getting, stopped by that. So in the cases of DUIs, there are, again, some rules that they need to follow. And there's a website that we can share with you that will show the standard procedures. This is at least from the Honolulu Police Department. And don't resist. You have rights, but don't resist, because resisting, running will give them probable cause. Okay. So another golden rule: obey first and fight after. Okay. Another thing is that Hawaii is part of the Ninth Circuit, and I'm gonna put it out there. In the Ninth Circuit, they cannot stop you because of ethnic appearance. That is not a relevant factor in justifying a general investigatory stop. However, we kind of all know the reality. Now we are ready to go to another scenario where you can have interaction with police or ICE, and it is in the workplace, regardless if it's a raid or not. Okay, because a lot of people are focused on raids. Raids are not necessarily going on right now in Hawaii. That doesn't mean that they will not happen. That's why exactly we're doing this, to equip people, meaning employees and employers and everybody, to get ready if that happens. However, an ICE officer can come into a workplace without it being a raid. So we need to be ready. So again, let's go to the practical tips. And I know this is a lot, sorry, but it is important. So I have separated the how to react if you are an employee and if you are an employer or a business owner, okay? Because they look different. And we really want to also empower the employer, because there are so many things, little thingies that an employer can do to protect their business and their beloved employees. Because we all know that migrants and immigrants play a key role in the economy, and the businesses. So it is important to protect. There's another reason to protect them. So as an employee, again, don't run away. We have, it's not being repetitive. It's just that we're stressing out the importance. Don't run away. Running away could give ICE a legal reason to arrest you. However, if you can, if you're paying attention and you see something like that, move. Don't run, but start moving to an area that is not accessible to the public, or that is identified as employees only, or no trespassing, or private office. Because, and that's we will discuss that a little bit further later on. There are things that the employer can do to protect certain areas. So the ICE and police can only go into public places. However, it's a private business, so it's private property. So the employer has the right to say, go away, okay? Unless they have a warrant, a judicial warrant. Another thing that you can do as an employee is that if you just tell them, this is classic, but I'm gonna make a differentiation here. It's basically saying, I only work here. So you're not the business owner, so you have no authority to let anybody in. So you will say, you don't have permission or authority to allow them in or to talk to them. I am going to make a slight change, and this is another tip and a recommendation. I know that I started saying, I only work here, but don't say that. Because yes, the law says that only people who have a work permit can work. And that is the law. And I abide, I need to abide by the law, and I am an officer of the law. So definitely that's the way it should be. However, there are certain people that are not necessarily with a work permit for whatever reasons. And so remember that anything and everything that you say can be held against you. So don't say I work here. Just say I have no authority to let you in. You need to talk to the owner or the supervisor or the manager, okay? Don't interact or show any documents. You don't have to. I know you're going to be anxious. Don't do that. So if you're an employer, there's so many things that you can do. Number one, ask ICE to show the judicial warrant. Of course, Emily just covered that, and that is applicable to any scenario. Also, you don't need to produce any documents. If they ask you for the I-9s, for the authorizations to work of your employees, that is not, they don't have jurisdiction over that. And because that would be an audit, and an audit needs to be notified in advance. And also you have 3 days to provide those documents. So don't. Employee files, they have no access unless the warrant specifies that, but general rule, they will not have it, and the warrant will not include that. So keep your documents and your employees' files in a safe place, protected area. Also, and very important, this is so easy to do, mark certain areas of your business as private, employees only, no public beyond this point, no trespass, private office. And that way they will not be able to go in there. You can definitely ask them to leave, okay, or not to go in there. Also, nowadays, cameras are so cheap, easy to install. So have those cameras and make sure that they are working properly, so that way you can record everything. If they, and I already covered the I-9s. Again, practical tips, many things that you don't know. You don't have to. Okay. Now we are going to transition a little bit, and we're going to talk about, I am not going to talk about removal proceedings and what it entails and everything else, but I need to go and explain a little bit on that, because like Emily said, there are certain rights or even obligations that look a little bit different. So I just want to make sure that we are on the same page and nobody gets confused, okay? So removal proceedings, it's also known as AKA deportation. So that means that, and there are grounds for deportation and inadmissibility. However, right now we're going to focus on deportation, because deportation is for people who are here and, they're going to be expelled from the country. And yes, due process applies. So there's a process that needs to be completed. However, this is not the forum. Right now, we need to focus on know your rights. Who can be deported? Well, basically anyone who is not a U.S. citizen. Yeah, there are some exceptions, but I'm not going to talk about it. Anyone who is not a U.S. citizen. So who's that? Well, green card holders. Yes, they can be deported. Visa holders, those without legal status, and members of the COFA community. All those groups can be deported. So if you are in removal proceedings, yes, you have the right to remain silent. However, you have an obligation to report with ICE, okay? Especially if you were released under recognizance, you need to check in with ICE. That's an obligation. So most probably you will have appointments for check-in in person, or you have an app installed in your phone, and that's an interaction. So if you get a notification from ICE and you have the duty to report to ICE, you cannot remain silent because then you're going to be in violation, right? So you see how, it's important for us to really be careful on how these rights apply. So you need to respond. If ICE, if you are under the obligation to check in, you need to respond. Also, there are certain documents that you need to carry with you. You also have the obligation to keep your address. So you don't need to disclose, but if you're in removal proceedings, you do have to disclose your address. And you need to keep your address updated with ICE and the immigration court. Also, you can be, well, your release on recognizance may be revoked, and most probably you'll be arrested and sent to federal detention if you are charged with any violation of law, if you're working without a work permit, if you fail to comply with your obligations, your check-ins with the immigration officers, if you fail to appear in court when you have a hearing. I'm going to be talking about these documents in shortly, because I want to go over my final topic, and it is which documents you should carry and which ones you should not carry. I think that it's better if I start saying which ones you should not carry, okay? You should not carry documents showing your country of origin, including passport or cédula de identificación. You should not, okay? Keep those at home. You don't need to carry that. Of course, don't carry false ID or false, immigration documents. That being said, you should carry your green card. You have to. And also, yes, you have the right to remain silent, but if you get detained or, just show your green card. Because it's like, yeah, I'm here, I'm okay. Well, your work permit, your I-94, and this is especially applicable to the COFA community, or those who are on parole because they complied with the CBP-1, that it's kind of extinct right now. But yeah, we do have a lot of clients that complied with that, so they were issued an I-94. Of course, carry your state ID, your driver's license, receipts of any pending applications that you have filed with the USCIS, your notice to appear if you are in removal proceedings, because that is evidence of your registration as an alien. I also added copy of at least the first page of your relief, your application for relief before the immigration court, because you may not have a receipt from a USCIS application, but you have the copy of what you filed in immigration court. Extremely important. Carry with you a red card and your attorney's business card, because you need to call them immediately, okay? And I'm gonna stop sharing because I am done with my portion. Thank you so much for bearing with me.
Thank you so much, Narabelle, for all of that beautiful information, and definitely about the times in which you're not allowed to stay silent, and where you have to speak, and for clarifying things that sometimes we don't get to clarify so often when so much information is flying around. So thank you for getting into the details. I appreciate your time. Next, I'd like to invite Aparna Patri to please share with us some of your expertise. Aparna immigrated to the United States at age 13 before naturalizing in her 20s. Her personal experiences immigrating to the United States inform every aspect of her work. She is a dedicated and passionate immigrant rights attorney with over a decade of experience in civil litigation and federal policy. Aparna has represented numerous clients in immigration matters, including asylum, removal, detention, family-based immigration, U visas, and business immigration matters. Today, she'll be covering sensitive places, churches, schools, and hospitals. Thank you so much for joining us today, Aparna. We're lucky to have you. Take it away.
Thank you so much. I'm really happy to be here with all of you. And there's such a breadth and wealth of knowledge on this panel. I just feel very honored to be here to be able to share some of this information. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Please bear with me. Okay, can everyone see that? Great. Okay, so I am an attorney in private practice here on Maui, but I work very closely with Roots Reborn, which is an organization born after the Maui wildfires, the Lahaina wildfires, and the purpose of the organization is to provide services to immigrants, all kinds of services to immigrants, with a focus on wildfire survivors. I started the legal program at Roots Reborn, so we provide immigrant legal services to our clients. And we've also, started working on Know Your Rights, on policy advocacy, and sort of providing as comprehensive of a set of services to our community as possible. So today I'm going to cover your rights in 3 locations: schools, churches, and healthcare facilities. The reason that we're focusing on these 3 areas today is because in previous years, there was guidance given to ICE and to DHS from the president that these were areas that were sensitive locations that were essentially off limits for immigration enforcement. The Trump administration has removed that in an executive order, which means that these are no longer off limits and are places that ICE can go to conduct immigration enforcement. We don't know yet what this is going to look like. And I just want to echo Emily's comment at the beginning that these things are changing on a daily basis. We are just a few weeks into the Trump administration this time around. And so things are changing daily. And the best thing we can do is prepare for what's to come. We don't know what it's actually going to look like in these 3 locations. And hopefully we can give you more information as these enforcement actions actually happen. Okay, hold on a second here. Okay, so I'm going to start with schools as the first location. So Emily and Narabel already covered this, but I think I'm going to go up one second. Here we go. Sorry about that. I'm just going to start by talking about some of the rights in the school context. So this is in the K through 12 context specifically, but the Supreme Court has held in a seminal case that public schools must be accessible to all children, regardless of their immigration status. So all children, whether undocumented or not, have the right to a public education. Federal law also prohibits discrimination in public education on the basis of race, ethnicity, or national origin. So students, whether documented or undocumented, regardless of their immigration status, have the right to an equal education and education free from discrimination in public schools. Also, when children are present in school buildings, the school essentially is responsible for their care in place of their parents. And so this is a pretty big responsibility that schools have that they need to keep in mind for K through 12. What makes schools and healthcare facilities, which I'll talk about in a minute, a little bit different from everywhere else, is that there are certain privacy rights that apply to students. So the FERPA, which is a federal law that the Family Education Rights and Privacy Act, requires that schools withhold information that could identify students and information about students to third parties. And this includes federal immigration officials. So this is an important law to keep in mind if you are a school administrator, work at a school, if you're a student, that FERPA gives you certain rights that go beyond in the school, go beyond the Fourth Amendment in the school setting. And again, school officials don't have an obligation to cooperate with ICE without a judicial warrant. We talked about the difference between a judicial warrant and an administrative and ICE removal order and ICE warrant. Those 2 things are different, and school officials, even if they're public schools that get federal funding, have no obligation to cooperate with ICE without that court warrant. And most importantly, school officials have an obligation to their students. This is the obligation that you need to keep in mind as a school official. You're responsible for the care of your students, for the safety of your students, and you can do a lot as a school official and a school administrator to safeguard the rights of your students. So next I'm going to talk about what schools can do ahead of time to prepare. So going back to when we were talking about the Fourth Amendment, the Fourth Amendment protects areas from unreasonable search and gives people a reasonable expectation of privacy. So what schools can do to prepare for potential ICE enforcement in school settings is to clearly mark certain areas private, right? So whether that's the front door of the school itself and having a big sign that says private area, unauthorized entry not permitted, or explaining who it is that's allowed inside the door. Or if you have a front desk, having all the areas behind the front desk marked private and make very clear in those areas by having things up on the walls and on the doors, that those are areas that are private, so that if ICE shows up, you can have the person at the front desk very clearly state, I can't let you behind this door. This is a private area. This is for students and faculty only. This is for students and teachers only. So the best thing you can do is to put up those signs and to also train your staff at your school not to consent to ICE entering those areas, and also to not identify whether or not certain students go to that school. ICE might come and say, I hear that so-and-so is at this school. Is that true? Does that person go here? You're not under any obligation to respond to that question. The right response is that you can't share that information, that it's private information that that's protected under FERPA, and that you will need to see a judicial warrant in order to provide that information or let the ICE agent into the school to conduct a search. Another thing that folks can do is give people refreshers on FERPA. Schools already likely do these trainings on FERPA as it is, but give a refresher on what the school officials' obligations are under FERPA so that school officials are aware. And make sure that they know the difference between ICE and law enforcement. I always tell people, put the question back on the person asking. Can I see your identification, please? What agency are you with? Before answering any questions at all, make sure you know who it is that you're talking to. Ask for their ID. If you feel safe, take a picture of their ID. Keep that so that you know exactly who it is you're talking to. We are also encouraging schools to establish protocols for drop-off and for pickup. If ICE is waiting outside of the school at the drop-off line, because one possibility is that ICE waits for the parent of the student to come and pick up the student or drop the student off and arrest them in that interaction, in that setting. So schools should have protocols for if ICE is hanging around outside of the school. Is there some other way you can communicate with the family to let them know this is happening? Is there some other place you can release the student besides the front door? Have these protocols set up for these worst case scenarios. And a protocol to inform families if there's ICE presence at the school. Also important to have an emergency plan. I know this is really difficult to think about, but parents should list 1 or 2 local friends or family members who can receive the child from the school in the event of an ICE raid that leaves a child without parents. There should be a plan for those children if the parent is taken up by ICE. That plan should include who's going to take care of them. Are there powers of attorney that you can sign to give other adults the authority to care for those children temporarily and make decisions for those children? Also, language barriers. Maintain a database of staff and what languages they speak in order to readily identify and recruit people for help with interpreting in the event that ICE arrests and detains the parent of a child who does not speak English. And in the event that there is an ICE interaction at the school, all staff should be trained to contact legal counsel for the school district immediately, or at the very least, contact a supervisor who can contact legal counsel for the school immediately to get advice on what to do next. So that's the school setting. Okay, healthcare facilities, another sensitive location that is fair game and where we could see ICE activity, unfortunately. Same thing as with schools. There's a reasonable expectation of privacy in private areas of a healthcare facility or a hospital. So the best thing you can do to prepare ahead of time, if you're a healthcare professional, work in a healthcare setting, or run a healthcare facility, is to clearly mark areas private and not consent to ICE entering those areas to try to question anyone. Also, similar to FERPA, patients have the right to privacy. HIPAA, the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, gives patient health information protection. So if ICE comes and asks, is so-and-so in this healthcare facility, there is no obligation to respond to that. That is protected patient healthcare information that's protected under federal law. Another thing that healthcare facilities can do is minimize the amount of data that they collect on patients. Only collect what is necessary. It is not necessarily necessary to collect data on a patient's healthcare status, right, or immigration status. So just collect the least amount of data necessary to do the work. HIPAA information can be only disclosed with a court order or a judicial warrant or a subpoena, and subpoenas typically take time to respond to, and there's negotiation that is involved in what will be responded to in the subpoena that your legal counsel can help you with, or in other sort of emergency situations, to identify, locate, or suspect a fugitive, a material witness, a missing person, or for information about a victim to assist in a criminal investigation. But those are law enforcement, not ICE functions. Those are assisting in a criminal investigation. We're talking about police there, not ICE. So ICE is none of the above on those situations. So here's what hospitals can do. Similarly to schools, put up signs to mark private areas and have protocols for if the private areas are breached. Hospitals often have intercom systems. Healthcare facilities have intercom systems. What can you agree to ahead of time, and what procedures and protocols can you put forward ahead of time in case those areas are breached, even though you don't give consent to entry? Train staff not to give consent to search or entry. Train staff on the difference between a judicial warrant and a ICE administrative warrant or removal order. Similar to schools, train staff on the difference between a police officer and ICE officer. Revisit your protocols on hospital visitation and who can visit, so that you can ensure that the minimal amount of people get to visit and see the patient. And make sure that your staff are trained on HIPAA. Okay, finally, I'm going to go to places of worship. As Emily said, the First Amendment protects the right to practice religion, to association, and to peaceful assembly. And I'm going to talk about, sanctuary congregations. There are some churches that view themselves sort of as sanctuaries, that they want to be willing to take in undocumented immigrants or folks who are, fleeing deportation and house them. And it's very important to understand that there is a federal law that makes it a felony for an organization or an individual to bring an undocumented immigrant into the United States, to conceal an undocumented immigrant, harbor them, shield them from detection, or transport them, or encourage an undocumented immigrant to remain in the United States. However, no court has held that simply providing food or shelter to an undocumented immigrant encourages that person to remain in the United States. And that federal law prohibits materially encouraging the undocumented immigrant to stay in the United States. So there are things that places of worship can do to try to protect the immigrant community without running afoul of this law. The lowest risk activity is to, provide services to the community regardless of immigration status. So just have a non-discrimination policy. We provide these services regardless of whether you're undocumented or not. And don't inquire about immigration status. Protect the right to privacy of your congregants. It's better not to have that information because you provide the services to everyone, and that makes it less likely that you could be accused of running afoul of the harboring law. Congregations can also speak out on immigrant rights. There's the right to peaceful protest. There's the right to free speech. Use that. Make that the way that you advocate for the immigrant community. And remember, again, the Fourth Amendment applies here too, right? So mark private areas private. Do not consent to a search. And don't identify your congregants. If you're a pastor and an ICE agent is asking you if a particular congregant is in your congregation, you don't need to answer that question. The highest risk activities, like I said before, bringing undocumented immigrants into the United States, assisting in that, offering shelter or housing while concealing immigrants from law enforcement, transporting undocumented immigrants to prevent their existence or whereabouts from being discovered. This is a bit of a murky area of the law. And so if you are a place of worship that is planning to do these activities, please secure legal counsel and make sure that you have cleared the activities that you plan to do with your legal counsel. Train your congregants on their rights and have policies as a church, as a place of worship, on what to do if ICE enters and tries to conduct a raid or conduct a search. Just quickly on the executive orders, we touched on some of these already, but I just want to go over them. So the reason I went through these 3 locations is because the sensitive locations memo that previously existed has been rescinded. And so the best thing that, these sensitive locations can do is to have procedures and protocols in place to handle ICE if they are to show up. Expedited removal is another executive order that has come down. It indicates that if you are an undocumented immigrant and you are living in this country less than 2 years, the due process right to have a hearing before deportation does not apply. So, unless you express a fear of returning to your home country. People who express a fear of returning to their home country are still entitled to a reasonable fear interview and are still entitled to the due process that comes with the removal hearing. But others, if you've been in the country less than 2 years and you're here undocumented, the due process right to a hearing does not apply, right? And so the best thing that you can do if you've been here longer than 2 years is to have that evidence of 2+ years of residence. So whether that's a utility bill or a bank statement with a date on it or your taxes, carry those things with you and carry more than one item so that there are items with dates that show that you've been here longer than 2 years. The last executive order that I'll go over quickly is the birthright citizenship order. This is one that was struck down on the very first day by a federal court. There's a stay on this order and it runs squarely against the Constitution. And so I think it's important for people to understand with all of these executive orders, there's a lot coming down. It is a shock and awe campaign on the president's part. A lot of these are going to be challenged in court, have already been challenged in court, and a lot of these are going to be struck down. And so we need to stay calm and be patient and kind of monitor and see what happens with these. And the only advice I'll give on this is continue to do the process of obtaining a birth certificate. Don't be afraid of getting a birth certificate for your child, despite this executive order. It's important to have that. So go ahead and get that. And that's it for my piece. I will stop sharing my screen and pass it back. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Aparna, for all of that wonderful information and for your preparation. Really appreciate your time. And our last speaker of the night, we will get to some questions. I know we're running a little behind time, and I wanted to let everybody know that we will have these slides made available as well as the training online. Everybody who has registered will receive a copy to a link that will have all of these resources readily available to you. And without further ado, I'll turn it over to our last speaker, and I'm so happy that she's been able to join us tonight. Liza. Liza is the executive director and founder of the Hawaii Coalition for Immigrant Rights, a coalition of immigrant-led and serving organizations across Hawaii. Liza is from Vancouver, Canada, and previously the organizing director of the largest immigrant rights organization in the Northeast. HCIR works on federal, state, and local legislative policy. So I'd invited Liza here today, a little bit different than the rest of our panelists, because I think it's really important to give the community hope to know that, all the information you've received thus far is quite defensive. I want you to know that we have community members like Liza and others who are just these unsung heroes that are trying to fight for your rights offensively. So you don't always have to be on the defense. So I'd love, Liza, without further ado, to share sort of what you've got planned and what you see in the horizon and how people can become part of your mission. Thank you.
Aloha mai kako, Liza Ryan Gill, and I'm really excited to be with you today. I'm just going to go. I'm not going to share my slides. Because I know that we want to leave time for the last 5 minutes here. But if I'll put in the chat an opportunity, we are a coalition of about 30 immigrant serving organizations, and we've been working for the last 5 sessions at the legislature to pass, as you'll see in my background, both on language access for fire survivors, and really found our footing during COVID-19. And we're really lucky to work with the Legal Clinic and Roots Reborn and the ACLU on so many different issues. I feel like, we're all talking to each other every single day. But just to let you know, we do have bills that we are proactively putting forward at the legislature. Obviously, the ledge started the third Wednesday, thank you, of January, just about the same time as inauguration. And oh boy, have we been running at a flat out sprint since then. Yeah, that's a perfect slide right there. That one with HB 22. So we have a number of bills. If you're familiar with the legislative process here in Hawaii, it starts in the middle of January, goes till like the first week of May, and it's absolute chaos. And what we have been working on we've got a number of bills. These are the ones that are still pretty much alive at this point in time. But what we did, and I will say, we've had some really collaborative legislators that have been very, very supportive. Representative Iligan, Representative Aquino, even Vice Speaker Linda Ichiyama have been super supportive, and that our judiciary chairs, so Senator Rhodes and Senator Tarnas, super supportive. And they've worked with us to think about what are the bills that we could do to proactively try to uphold folks' due process and rights. As you've all learned, through our many illustrious speakers here, despite what is coming from the feds, we still have rights right now in this time, and we can build on those and that due process. So just to go through a couple of things that are still alive right now, HB 22 relating to collaboration with the federal government. This is one, this one's a little bit controversial. We've been holding it and moving it forward. It has to do with not allowing our local law enforcement to honor requests from ICE to hold somebody once they have been detained. I will say that we, in this process, Roots Reborn and ourselves and the Legal Clinic, we've had conversations with three of our 4 chiefs of police. We haven't gotten to Kauai yet. And we have been assured, actually, that at the local level, our local police are not honoring ICE detainers. So that is also just something so that we can all know. And in fact, in the conversations that we've had with Chief Moskowitz over on Hawaii Island, and here on Chief Logan, and Parna could speak to talking with the chief over in Maui, but they have been really supportive in wanting to communicate that they are here for everyone. And when we've, questioned them about their involvement with immigrations and custom enforcement, they are like, we have no idea what they're doing. They have their job over there, and we have our job. We're not talking, we're not collaborating. There are some technology that means that if somebody is arrested by local police, that information does go to ICE as it does to every other like federal law enforcement agency. But just so that folks know, we do not have, we don't have chiefs of police that are trying actively to collaborate with Immigrations and Customs Enforcement. So we have that. HB 73 unfortunately just died today. And so we did have a bill concerned about building larger detention. We don't have much jail space. So if the feds were trying to detain and house a bunch of people here, we were concerned that then maybe that they would want to build some new space. We have subsequently found out that the Federal Detention Center has quite a few beds. And so they are not in need of that right now. And so we're less concerned about that and not going to be moving on HB 73. We're really excited about these last two, HB 438 relating to due process protections. As you've all heard, like this is extremely complicated, right? And when folks end up in detention, if you don't have an attorney, if you don't have one of these amazing women that are helping you get through this process, then it's not looking good for you. And so Hawaii is classified as a legal desert on immigration, and we don't have enough immigration attorneys that are serving, especially on our neighbor islands. We would like to get some more money through the judiciary to be able to fund more amazing, incredible pro bono immigration attorneys to help these folks that are in detention and help them to be able to fight their case, right? That's what makes this country, that's what makes the Constitution. You have a due process right. If you don't get to see a judge or you're expected to represent yourself as somebody who doesn't speak English as their first language, that's not really justice. That is, going through the steps. And so we really believe in this bill. And we want to see our young attorneys that are fired up also be able to be hired for this. So, and then there's lastly, HB 457 relating to civil rights protections. We kind of call this our Miranda Plus. If you've watched a cop drama, you know when they Mirandize you, you have the right to remain silent. Again, this has to do with due process protection, and our focus on language access is that if somebody is detained, they still have the right to refuse an interview with an ICE agent if they're in local custody. But it's very hard to refuse that or understand what's happening if that information is not provided to you in a language that you understand. We've had conversations with our chiefs of police. They are amenable to helping us figure out how we can make sure that folks understand what their rights are in a language that they understand. So to the best of their ability, they can make those choices for themselves. So if you would like to be kept up on all of these bills, please join us on our listserv. And I'll put that in the Q&A chat for folks if they want to add that, and hopefully that can go out with folks. If you are interested in sharing Know Your Rights materials in up to 6 languages, we have a project with amazing community communicators in Tongan, Chuukese, Marshallese, Ilocano, Tagalog, and Spanish. Please follow us on our Instagram so you can reshare those posts about Know Your Rights in languages that are relevant to here. And very, very lastly, just on the point of rumors around ICE, this is something I've been spending days and days and days tracking down whether or not rumors are correct, because we don't want to see our kids, fear is the point. Fear is part of the strategy, and it is the outcome that they want, right? And it's not to say that people shouldn't report if they think that they see something, but we have not seen an action yet at a school. And we have been able to confirm that with Homeland Security investigations, senior officials. If you have a credible rumor of an action at a sensitive location, please message us at HCIR. We have a line of communication open with Department of Homeland Security to verify whether or not that occurred. And then we will post on our Instagram whether or not that rumor is false or correct. And so please, we just want the kind of panic is really causing harm across the board. And so we just want to make sure that we're all working collectively to develop good protocols so that we can, keep people's lives moving forward as much as possible. We don't want there to be an exceeding level of panic. So that's it.
Thank you so much, Liza, for everything you're doing in the community. And, we will keep the fight alive for the surviving bills and all hands on deck. And likewise, if you have not yet joined Liza's listserv, please do so. If you're not yet a member of the American Civil Liberties Union of Hawaii, please become one. We encourage you to become part of our community so you can get our updates and learn how to become politically engaged, civically engaged in the legislative process and submit testimony to support our various bills. And so now, this ends the formal portion of our Know Your Rights workshop. And I understand we are right at the 7 o'clock mark if people need to go, but we will take time to answer some questions live. I'll field those now. I see that we've answered already about 32 questions. So if you've had a question that's already been answered, please feel free to look in the answered portion of the Q&A. And there are still a number of open questions as well as some questions that we received prior by email. So I see, Emily, that you wanted to answer one question live about birthright citizenship. It says, do I have to worry about birthright citizenship being taken away if one parent is an immigrant and one parent is not? Go ahead.
Thanks, Selma. So I wanted to answer this one live because I know there's been so much misinformation about the different executive orders, and that's causing a lot of extra fear. So first off, the executive order that has been issued, while it's not good, it's not taking away birthright citizenship for people who already have it. That's like the first caveat that I wanted to add. I think the other part of that is the other answer to the question is no. Right now, the executive order as it is currently written is about not giving birthright citizenship to children who are born within 30 days of the issuance of that order. If the mother is unlawfully present and the dad was not a citizen, or when the mother's presence was temporary and the dad was not a citizen. So it's not if one parent is a citizen and the other parent isn't.
Thank you so much. There have been I see Narabelle is answering one question, typing the answer right now. And there's another question. Do people with LEP have access to language support if ICE visits their homes with a valid search warrant? Or how does the language access law apply to ICE in this situation? Any of our panelists, if any of you would like to try to take a stab at that.
I've never heard of an interpretation live at an ICE visit, but I do believe that you have the right to seek an interpreter if you are detained.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, I can elaborate a little bit. Thank you so much, Liza. I was the one because she deals a lot with language access. Okay, so as a general rule, you need to understand, that's part of due process. You need to understand what's going on in your language. As a general rule, I underline. So, usually there are deviations from that. But not if ICE knocks on your door, they will not have a warrant and they will not have interpreters. So again, that's why it is extremely important for you not to sign anything, for you not to say anything. Don't engage. Again, the red card is a very good tool, and because you don't have to say anything. It's basically you're saying, I'm not going to talk to you. And that way you're not incriminated. But in removal proceedings, yes, you do have the right to have an interpreter in your own language, if that answers the question.
Thank you so much, Narabelle and Liza. There's some questions we received ahead of time, one of which is ICE allowed on the University of Hawaii grounds? I'll let Aparna take this one.
Yeah, sure. I know my presentation focused on K through 12, but we have some questions about higher education. Similar to what I said before about public versus private areas, it's important as a university to mark what the private and public areas are. University grounds are a bit more fluid in terms of kind of what the public and private areas are, just by virtue of having, quads and grassy spaces and things like that. And so it might, ICE may feel kind of emboldened to go to that area. So all the more reason why in a university having those private areas marked is important. If ICE does, try to talk to a student on university grounds, I would encourage to just treat that as an interaction as if you're being stopped in any other public place. Exercise your right to silence. If you've got papers and documentation that you can show those. As an LPR, show your green card, have that information on you, show what you do have. But if you are undocumented, exercise your right to silence. In terms of, I know that we have another question about, students expressing their views on various political issues, engaging in protests, especially, the pro-Palestine movement, speaking up about living conditions, working conditions, etc. This is a little bit of a trickier one. I think it's important for students engaging in protests to take trainings on kind of how to do that in such a way that does not, try to avoid getting arrested, try to avoid, how you can express yourself and engage in a protest without it veering into something where you can be accused of, physically hurting someone or, and don't resist arrest. I think that if you're going to engage in those activities as a college student, it's important to sort of know what your rights are specifically in a protest context. I will say that there is an EO that an executive order that Trump has issued that kind of opens the door to denying or revoking visas to people who, based on ideology, so who bear hostile attitudes towards the U.S. citizens, towards U.S. culture, towards the government, institutions, or founding principles. I expect that will also be challenged in court as a violation of the First Amendment. And so I think that that's something we'll have to kind of wait and see. But I do think students on student visas need to be a little bit careful and mindful that these are things that are coming down the pike and we're keeping a close eye on them and should have more information as we know more.
Thank you so much, Aparna, for that information. Someone asked a question about homeless shelters. Would similar guidance apply that you had shared with us about hospitals? Would that apply to homeless shelters as well?
Yeah, I can take that one too. Similar to hospitals, similar to schools, similar to churches, homeless shelters are also private areas, and there are delineations between private and public. So important to just put up a sign that says private areas. If you have someone working at if you have folks working at the homeless shelter, good idea to get them trained on these things, just as you would, for hospital workers and school administrators, that they're not to consent to searches by ICE, to not let ICE inside without a judicial warrant, and to mark areas private, and to actively say, I cannot let you inside. I do not consent to you entering and conducting a search. Same thing would apply.
Thank you so much. So someone asked the question if ICE can use the same old records that they used before to deport them again, and what should they do if they come across them? Old charges and old proceedings.
Okay, I can take that one. However, answering that question with only that fact pattern with, it's hard. Because I would have to see the specifics, so definitely seek the advice of an attorney. However, I can see at a glimpse, I can see two situations here. One is if you had a previous deportation order, you cannot come back. So that means that something happened and you have a second deportation, or you came back. If you have a previous deportation order, definitely you're going to be deported. So the other situation that I can see is you don't have a deportation order, but you were put on removal proceedings. And if they can use the same thing, so it will depend on if you got a waiver or if you got a deportation order. So, when so many factors need to be taken into consideration, that's something that it's very particular. You need to seek the advice of a counsel, definitely.
Thank you. Someone asked, as a government worker, are there any implications for supporting undocumented immigrants? What recommendations do you have?
I can take that one. I think it's kind of hard to answer that question just because it really depends what support means. I think, and this sort of veers into like employment law, which is not really what we're talking about today. I think the best rule of thumb would be to make sure that your personal activities are very strictly cabined away from what you're doing during your employment, right? You're not doing any of this like during work hours, not on your work computer, anything like that, because anything that you're doing like during the course of your employment is fair game for them to sort of discipline you for. If we're talking about speech, so expressing support, going to protests or to rallies or attending talks like this, like that I think is very squarely protected under the First Amendment. I would think volunteering at places like homeless shelters with organizations that help immigrants, like that would probably be protected under freedom of association. But I also think with this administration, sort of all bets are off, and we know that federal employment is sort of precarious right now.
Thank you so much, Emily. Another question is, I think Mirabel, for you, your organization, do you have red cards? I thought I saw Sandy Ma passing them out, and where can people get those?
I've been responding with a website that it's not our website, is from IRLC. They have red cards, and you can put a request. They will not, that those are, you don't pay for those. You can put a request for them to send you red cards in different languages. Right now they have 14 languages available. At the legal clinic, we have, we depend on also on those. However, we are in the process in conjunction with ACIR and other organizations like PGC, translating those into certain language that are very particular to Hawaii. And as soon as those are available, we will definitely send notifications out. We will spread the word. But right now we are not kind of massively distributing those because we don't have right now the supplies. But you can try to print on your own from that website. And I think that HCRI is going to be, the liaison at some point. And yeah, we're doing our best.
Thank you so much. And I know that our policy director has ordered Know Your Rights cards as well. They're not the red cards, but they have similar information. We've ordered about, I think, 1,000 of them. And so you'll see ACLU of Hawaii at different places, public events we're constantly hosting. Our field fellow, you'll probably see her tabling, and she'll have those hopefully the next time with some of those cards. And Emily, if you wanted to share some of your efforts on the translation front.
Right. So I was going to say we are putting together like a Hawaii specific resource that we are working on having translated. I don't know exactly when that's going to be done because we're trying to get a bunch of different languages, but I think that will be available soon. I
Great.
also wanted to add, I'm going to put into the chat. This is a website. It's called wehaverights.us. These were a series of short videos put together by a number of different organizations, like a collective of organizations about rights, immigration rights. They have been translated into a number of different languages. So this could be a good resource.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Emily. Well, we went 13 minutes over. Thank you all so much for your patience with us. And it was great to see, 140 participants today, as well as 50 different questions answered. And we will be sharing out the slides as well as this recording. We'll have it on our ACLU of Hawaii website. And I would empower you all to, feel free to reach out to any of these wonderful organizations, Roots Reborn of Maui, HCIR, the Legal Clinic, for any of your other needs. And we just want to send you a lot of hope, a lot of, prayers for resilience right now and for staying positive in times of unweariness, and to know that we are here for you as a community. And we are lucky again to be living on these islands of Hawaii. And we are looking forward to hopefully the legislature making some progressive movement this legislative season, so that we can really insulate ourselves and create a blue shield and more state cover, to push back against some of these federal policies that we see unwinding. So thank you so much, everyone, for your time. A deep, deep thank you to Aparna, Liza, Emily, and Narabelle for coming together in the last couple of days and just, throwing down and researching and being there to provide this information to the community. And I will let you all go for the evening. Take care and rest well. Mahalo.